When did you realize your parents should not have had kids? The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, because of course it did. My parents had always been experts at terrible timing. Sarah, honey, it's Mom. Her voice carried that familiar tone, part desperation, part entitlement, wholly exhausting. Your father fell again. The doctors say he needs round-the-clock care now, and you know how expensive those facilities are. We were hoping you could move back home for a while. Just until we figure things out. I sat in my downtown Chicago apartment, still in my work clothes from a long day of helping clients navigate their own family traumas, and felt that old familiar weight settle on my chest. The weight of being the responsible one. The fixer. The parent to my own parents. Mom, we've talked about this. I live 4 hours away. I have a practice here, patients who depend on. But we're family, Sarah. Family takes care of family. Family. The word she wielded like a weapon whenever she needed something, but had conveniently forgotten when I was 12 and making dinner for my 8-year-old brother Marcus every night because she was working late. Again. Or when I was 14, lying to teachers about why Marcus missed so many school events, covering for parents who were too busy networking at charity galas to notice their youngest child's stuttering had gotten worse. Where's David? I asked, referring to my older brother. Or Jessica. My younger sister, the baby of the family, who'd somehow managed to escape to California and maintain the blessed ignorance of the golden child. You know David's busy with his promotion, and Jessica has the twins to think about. Besides, you're the therapist. You understand these things better. There it was. The reason I'd been appointed family emotional janitor since childhood, now with professional credentials to make it official. Because I understood people, I was somehow obligated to sacrifice my own life to manage theirs. Through my living room window, I could see Lake Michigan stretching into darkness. I'd worked so hard to build this life. 5 years of graduate school while supporting myself completely, because asking Richard and Linda Brennan for help meant owing them, and owing them meant never escaping. 7 years building my practice from nothing, specializing in family trauma and childhood emotional neglect. The irony wasn't lost on me. I need to think about it, I said finally. Well, don't think too long. Your father's condition isn't going to improve, and we can't afford $8,000 a month for memory care. Not with what I make at the school district. After 43 years of marriage, my mother still couldn't bring herself to say we when discussing their finances. Everything was compartmentalized with them. Her money, his money, their problems becoming my problems. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, a nice Pinot Noir I'd bought to celebrate landing a new corporate consulting contract. The same contract that would finally let me start saving for the house I'd been wanting. The life I'd been building step by careful step, brick by brick, away from the chaos they called love. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mom called you too, huh? Don't do it, Sarah. Not this time. Smart kid. Well, not a kid anymore, he was 24 now, in his second year of law school. The little boy I'd raised had grown up to see our parents exactly as clearly as I did. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things entirely. The next morning brought 3 more calls before I'd even finished my coffee. Mom again at 6:23 a.m., because apparently my need for sleep ranked somewhere below her anxiety about Dad's medical bills. Then Jessica at 7:15, her voice bright and cheerful from her Marin County bubble. Sarah. Mom told me about Daddy. It's so wonderful that you can help out. I mean, you don't have kids or anything tying you down, and your job is so flexible. Flexible. As if conducting therapy sessions was something I could do from anywhere, like selling insurance or writing blog posts. As if the 8 clients I saw every Tuesday weren't depending on me to help them work through their own family disasters. Jess, my practice isn't flexible. I have people. But surely you can do that phone therapy thing. Teletherapy or whatever. Mom says Dad might only need help for a few months while they find other arrangements. Other arrangements. We all knew there were no other arrangements. There was just me, the family cleanup crew, being asked once again to put my life on pause so theirs could continue unchanged. The third call came from David at 8:47, just as I was walking into my office. Look, Sarah, I know this sucks, but Mom's really freaking out. And you know how she gets when she's stressed, she'll make everyone miserable until someone fixes it. So fix it yourself, I said, unlocking my office door with more force than necessary. Come on, be realistic. Jennifer and I are looking at a $2.3 million mortgage on the new house. I can't take time off right now, not with the Henderson acquisition happening. Besides, you're better with the emotional stuff. The emotional stuff. As if managing our parents' crisis was just another Tuesday for me, instead of a complete upheaval of the life I'd spent years building. David cleared his throat. Mom mentioned they could pay you something. Maybe $2,000 a month. I almost laughed. $2,000 a month to provide round-the-clock care, give up my $180 per hour client sessions, abandon my consulting contracts, and move back into the house where I'd spent my teenage years playing mother to everyone but myself. The same house where Dad had missed every single one of my school plays because work was more important, where Mom had forgotten my 17th birthday because she was organizing a fundraiser for the hospital auxiliary. David, I make more than that in a week. Yeah, but this would be easier money. And you'd be helping family. There was that word again. Family. The magic word that was supposed to make me forget how Mom had missed my college graduation because she double-booked herself with a school board meeting. How Dad had never once asked about my practice, my life, my dreams that didn't directly benefit them. After I hung up, I sat in my office looking at my appointment book. Mrs. Chen at 10 a.m., working through her daughter's eating disorder. The Morrison family at noon, trying to rebuild trust after their son's addiction recovery. Sarah Valdez at 2 p.m., dealing with the trauma of raising her siblings while her own mother battled addiction. The parallel hit me like a slap. How many times had I sat across from clients, helping them understand that they weren't responsible for fixing their parents' lives? How many times had I guided someone toward the realization that saying no to family dysfunction wasn't betrayal, it was survival? Yet here I was, 36 hours after that phone call, actually considering throwing away everything I'd built to become my parents' caretaker. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus, emergency session with my therapist this morning. Even thinking about them moving in with me triggered a panic attack. We're not their retirement plan, Sarah. Smart kid. Smarter than me, apparently. I was 20 minutes into my session with Sarah Valdez when the real punch to the gut came. She was telling me about her mother's latest crisis, another eviction notice, another desperate call for money, when she paused and looked at me with those sharp eyes that saw too much. Dr. Brennan, can I ask you something? You always help me see when my mom is manipulating me, but you look. I don't know. Tired today. More tired than usual. In 8 years of practice, I've maintained perfect professional boundaries. But something about the way she said it, the genuine concern from someone who knew what it felt like to be the family scapegoat, cracked something open in my chest. I'm fine, I said automatically, then caught myself using the same deflection I've been trained to recognize in others. Actually, that's not true. I'm dealing with some family pressures myself right now. Sarah leaned forward. Let me guess. They need something, and you're the only one who can provide it, and saying no makes you feel like a selfish monster even though you know they wouldn't do the same for you. The accuracy was startling. Something like that. My sponsor in Al-Anon says something that really helped me. She says, just because someone is drowning doesn't mean you have to drown with them. Especially if they're the one who pushed you in the water in the first place. After Sarah left, I sat staring at my case notes, her words echoing in my mind. Then I did something I'd never done before. I pulled out my personal phone and started scrolling through old family photos. There was Jessica's wedding 3 years ago. Mom and Dad front and center in every shot, beaming as they networked with Jessica's in-laws. I found myself in exactly 2 pictures, both taken by Marcus. In one, I'm clearly trying to wrangle my drunk uncle away from the open bar. In the other, I'm crouched down, cleaning red wine off the flower girl's dress while everyone else danced. David's promotion party last year. Same story. Mom spent the entire evening bragging to his colleagues about his success while I handled the catering crisis when they delivered the wrong appetizers. My own graduation from my doctoral program. I scrolled and scrolled. Nothing. Because they hadn't come. Scheduling conflict, Mom had said. Dad's retirement party from the accounting firm was the same weekend, and they'd already paid for the venue. I'd celebrated alone, then went to work the next Monday and spent the day helping other people process their family disappointments. My 2:30 appointment was Dr. Patricia Holmes, a colleague who was working through her own boundary issues with her aging mother. The irony of my day was becoming almost comical. Patricia, I said as we finished up, can I ask you something professional? She nodded. If you had a client whose parents had been emotionally negligent throughout their childhood, who had essentially raised their siblings while the parents pursued their own interests, and now those parents were demanding that same child sacrifice their career to provide caregiving, what would you tell them? Patricia's eyebrows rose. Are we talking about a hypothetical client, Sarah? I sighed. Not exactly. Then I'd tell them what I'm telling you right now. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Especially people who never bothered to notice when you were cold. At 4:15, my phone rang again. Mom, right on schedule. Sarah, I've been thinking. If $2,000 isn't enough, we could maybe do $2,500. And you could have your old room back. I've kept it exactly the same. My old room. The one where I'd spent countless nights doing homework at the kitchen table because Jessica was using my room for dance practice. The one I'd finally gotten to myself when I was 16, only to give it up again when Mom decided to turn it into her craft room the day after I left for college. Mom, where exactly would I be staying? Last I checked, you turned my room into your scrapbooking studio. Silence. Then, well, the basement is finished now. It's really quite nice. The basement. They wanted me to move 4 hours away, abandon my career, and live in their basement for $2,500 a month. I need more time to think, I said. Sarah Elizabeth, your father has good days and bad days. What if something happens and we're not? I hung up. For the first time in my adult life, I hung up on my mother. And it felt terrifying and liberating all at once. The silence after hanging up lasted exactly 43 seconds before my phone started buzzing again. I turned it face down and tried to focus on my notes for tomorrow's sessions, but the words blurred together. My hands were actually shaking. I'd hung up on my mother. In 34 years of life, I had never hung up on Linda Brennan. By 5:30, I had 12 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic voicemails. The last one wasn't from Mom, it was from Jessica, and her sunny California tone had shifted into something sharp and accusatory. Sarah, what is wrong with you? Mom is crying. Actually crying. She called me hysterical saying you hung up on her when she was trying to talk about Daddy's care. I don't know what kind of therapy mumbo-jumbo has gotten into your head, but this is our father we're talking about. Call her back and apologize. This is so selfish, even for you. Even for me. As if I'd made a career out of selfishness instead of spending my entire childhood making sure she had clean clothes and packed lunches. I was still staring at my phone when it rang again. This time it was David, and I made the mistake of answering. Jesus Christ, Sarah. What did you say to Mom? She's talking about having to put Dad in some state facility now. Do you want that on your conscience? David, there are excellent memory care facilities that cost $8,000 a month. Look, I talked to Jennifer, and we've decided we can help out financially. Maybe $1,000 a month toward Dad's care. But only if you're there to manage everything. We can't just throw money at some random nursing home and hope for the best. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd contribute $1,000 while I contributed my entire life, and somehow this was presented as them being generous. What about Jessica? I asked. What's she contributing besides guilt trips? She's got the twins, Sarah. Tommy's in that special program for his ADHD, and Lily's starting kindergarten. She can't just what? Write a check. Make phone calls. Visit more than twice a year. Look, we've all talked about this. You're the obvious choice. You don't have kids, you don't have a husband, and your job is basically just listening to people talk. How hard could it be to do that from mom and dad's house? Your job is basically just listening to people talk. 8 years of graduate school, 7 years building a practice, countless hours of training and supervision, reduced to just listening to people talk. David, I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. I have a waiting list of 43 people trying to get appointments with me. I have corporate contracts worth more than dad's entire pension. I have a life here that I built from nothing, with no help from any of you. I am not throwing that away to live in their basement and wipe dad's ass for $2,500 a month. The line went quiet. Then David's voice came back, colder than I'd ever heard it. You know what, Sarah? Mom was right. All that education, all that therapy training, and you still turned out to be a cold, selfish bitch. Don't come crying to us when you're old and alone and there's nobody left who gives a damn about you. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car in the parking garage under my building for 20 minutes, crying harder than I had since my residency. Not because of what David said, though that stung, but because of how familiar this felt. The rage, the guilt, the accusations, the demands. It was like being 15 again, trying to explain to mom why I couldn't skip my AP chemistry exam to babysit Marcus during her book club meeting. When I finally made it upstairs, there was an email waiting from Jessica. Asterisk Sarah, mom told me what you said to David. I'm honestly shocked. I never thought you could be this cruel to your own family. Dad might not have much time left, and you're choosing your career over being there for him. I'm forwarding you some information about family counselors in the Chicago area. Clearly you need help, asterisk. She'd attached 3 referrals to family therapists, as if the problem was my mental health rather than their expectations. The final straw came at 8:47 p.m. A text from mom. Asterisk your father keeps asking why you haven't called. I told him you're very busy with work. I didn't have the heart to tell him his own daughter doesn't care enough to help when he needs her most, asterisk. I stared at that text until the words burned into my retinas. His own daughter doesn't care enough to help. The manipulation was so blatant it should have been laughable, but instead it hit exactly where mom knew it would hurt most. I poured myself another glass of wine and did something I'd been avoiding for months. I opened the folder on my laptop labeled Family Dynamics Research. It contained every article, every case study, every piece of documentation I'd been collecting about narcissistic family systems and parentification trauma. Research I told myself was for my clients, but deep down knew was about understanding my own childhood. The Cartman drama triangle stared back at me from the screen: persecutor, victim, rescuer. I'd spent 34 years rotating through these roles like a twisted carnival ride. Tonight, I was being cast as the persecutor for refusing to rescue them from the consequences of dad's illness and their complete failure to plan for aging. My landline rang at 9:23 p.m. The landline that only 4 people had the number to, which I'd gotten specifically for emergencies. It was Jessica again, but this time she wasn't alone. Sarah, you're on speaker. I'm here with David and mom, and we need to talk. An intervention. They were staging an actual intervention because I dared to suggest I had value beyond being their unpaid caregiver. Mom's been crying for 3 hours, David's voice cut in. 3 hours, Sarah. Is this really the hill you want to die on? Your father had another episode today. Mom's voice was thick with tears, real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. He got confused and tried to drive to his old office. The police found him at a McDonald's on Route 47, completely lost. What if something worse happens while we're waiting for you to come to your senses? The guilt hit like a physical blow. I closed my eyes and saw Dad at 68, proud and sharp, helping me move into my first apartment after graduate school. He'd been 15 minutes late because of a work call, but he'd shown up. That was more than he'd done for most of my childhood milestones. Sarah. Jessica's voice had softened into the tone she used with her twins when they were being difficult. We're all scared, okay? None of us know how to handle this. But you're the one with the psychology background. You understand how his mind works now. That's not how it works, Jess. I'm not a neurologist. I can't. But you understand people, Mom interrupted. You always have. Remember when you helped Mrs. Patterson next door after her husband died? You were only 19, but you knew exactly what to say to help her through the grief. I remembered. I also remembered how Mom had volunteered my services without asking me first, then been annoyed when all that time, helping the neighbor, interfered with my ability to watch Marcus during her weekend pottery class. We've been talking, David said, and we think maybe we approached this wrong. What if it wasn't permanent? What if you took a sabbatical, 6 months, maybe a year, just to help get Dad stabilized and find a long-term solution? A sabbatical. As if my clients were interchangeable, as if the trust I'd built with people over months and years of work could just be paused and resumed like a Netflix subscription. I have a client, I said slowly, who hasn't spoken to her father in 3 years because he demanded she quit medical school to take care of her stepmother. She was 2 years away from becoming a surgeon. Her stepmother recovered completely, by the way. Lives independently now. But my client never went back to finish her degree. Silence on the line. That client pays me $180 an hour to help her process the resentment of giving up her dreams for people who wouldn't have done the same for her. Are you hearing me? That's completely different, Jessica snapped. We're talking about our father. Your father. The same father who missed my high school graduation because he had a golf tournament. The same father who forgot my birthday 3 years running because it was during tax season. He was working to provide for this family. And I'm working to provide for myself. Why is his work more important than mine? The question hung in the air like smoke. In 34 years, I don't think any of them had ever considered that my life, my work, my dreams might hold the same weight as theirs. Finally, Mom's voice came through, smaller now, more fragile. Sarah, honey, if you don't help us, I don't know what we're going to do. And there it was. The truth underneath all the manipulation and guilt. They genuinely had no plan, no resources, no idea how to handle their own crisis without me swooping in to fix it. Just like always. I hung up on all 3 of them and immediately called my own therapist's emergency line. Dr. Rachel Martinez had been seeing me for 2 years, helping me untangle the web of childhood parentification that I could diagnose in others but somehow couldn't escape myself. She called back within 20 minutes. Sarah, you sound like you're in crisis. What's happening? I told her everything, the demands, the guilt trips, David's cruel words, the three-way intervention. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, I want you to do something for me. I want you to imagine one of your clients called you tonight with this exact scenario. What would you tell them? The answer came immediately. I'd tell them to run. I'd tell them their family was using emotional blackmail to exploit their sense of responsibility. I'd tell them that people who truly love you don't threaten to cut you off when you can't sacrifice your entire life for them. And yet you're still considering it. She was right. Despite everything, the manipulation, the cruelty, the complete dismissal of my career, part of me was still calculating whether I could somehow make it work. Maybe I could do telehealth sessions in the morning, handle Dad's care in the afternoon, keep just my highest paying corporate clients. Why am I doing this to myself, Rachel? Because you're doing what you were trained to do from childhood. But Sarah, I need you to hear something. Your father's condition is not your emergency. Your parents' failure to plan for their old age is not your responsibility to fix. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at my laptop. I pulled up my client database and started scrolling through files. Jennifer Wu, 31, struggling with boundaries after being her family's emotional caretaker since age 12. Michael Santos, 28, who'd given up a scholarship to stay home and care for his chronically ill mother, only to watch his siblings inherit everything when she died. Lisa Park, 35, who'd spent her 20s managing her parents' finances and marriage problems instead of building her own life. I had 47 active clients dealing with some form of family enmeshment or parentification trauma. 47 people who trusted me to help them see what I apparently couldn't see in my own life. At 11:33 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, Sarah, I need to tell you something. I've been in therapy for 3 years working through our childhood. My therapist says what they're asking you to do is abuse. Straight up emotional abuse. Please don't go back there, Then another text, I did the math. In high school, you spent an average of 23 hours a week taking care of me while they were at their various activities and social obligations. That's a part-time job you were never paid for. Don't give them your whole life too, 23 hours a week. Marcus had actually calculated it. I was still staring at his texts when my email chimed. A message from my sister Jessica, sent to all of us. I've been thinking about this situation with Dad, and I realize I may have been too emotional earlier. I've done some research on caregiving options in the Chicago area, and there are some really good solutions. David and I could each contribute $2,500 monthly, and Sarah, you could oversee his care while maintaining your practice through telehealth. I found a service that provides daytime aides for $18 per hour, so you'd really just need to be there evenings and weekends. It could actually work out perfectly for everyone, Perfectly for everyone except me. Even Jessica's compromise involved me uprooting my life, moving 4 hours away, and becoming the family's unpaid care coordinator while they contributed money and continued living their undisturbed lives. The casual assumption that my time was worth less than theirs was breathtaking. David's $2,500 contribution would cost him maybe 6 hours of his legal work. Jessica's $2,500 represented perhaps 3 weekend shopping trips to her favorite boutiques in Sausalito. But my contribution, my entire life restructured around their emergency, was just expected. I started typing a response 3 different times and deleted each one. Finally, I wrote back. Jessica, thank you for researching options. I won't be able to relocate to provide care, but I'm happy to help you coordinate remote services from Chicago. There are excellent geriatric care managers who can oversee Dad's day-to-day needs for about $150/hour, I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came back in 4 minutes. $150 an hour. Sarah, that's almost $25,000 a month. We can't afford that. This is exactly why we need family to help family. I can't believe you're putting a price tag on Dad's life, I stared at her text in amazement. $25,000 a month was too expensive, but my sacrificing a $200,000 a year career was just good sense. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a voicemail from Mom that made my blood run cold. Sarah, your father is in the emergency room. He fell trying to get to the bathroom around 3 a.m. and we think he might have broken his hip. The doctors are saying he'll need surgery, and then weeks of rehabilitation. I can't do this alone anymore. Please, baby, I'm begging you. We need you. My hands were shaking as I called the hospital directly. Northwestern Memorial in their hometown, the same place where I'd been born 34 years ago. The nurse in the orthopedic unit confirmed that Richard Brennan had indeed fractured his hip and would need surgical repair, followed by intensive physical therapy. Are you family? She asked. I'm his daughter. I live in Chicago, but I can. Oh, you're Sarah. Your mother has been asking for you all night. She's really struggling, hon, this is overwhelming for someone her age. Someone her age. Mom was 66, the same age as my client Mrs. Patterson, who lived independently, traveled to visit her grandchildren in Portland, and had just started taking ballroom dance classes after her husband's death. But Mrs. Patterson had spent 40 years building a life outside of just being a wife and mother. Mom had spent 40 years making everyone else responsible for her emotional regulation. I was getting dressed to drive down to the hospital when David called. Thank God, he said when I answered. I've been trying to reach you since 5 a.m. Look, I know we said some harsh things yesterday, but this changes everything. Dad's going to need months of care, and Mom's having what looks like a complete breakdown. The social worker at the hospital is talking about discharge planning, and they need to know who's going to be his primary caregiver. David, there are rehabilitation facilities specifically designed for. The social worker already explained all that. Insurance covers 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we're lucky. After that, it's $12,000 a month out of pocket. Sarah, they don't have $12,000 a month. Dad's pension barely covers their mortgage and basic expenses. I closed my eyes and did the math I'd been avoiding. Dad had worked for the same accounting firm for 38 years, but he'd never been a partner, never built significant savings. Mom's job at the school district provided health insurance but minimal retirement benefits. They owned their house, but it was worth maybe $180,000 in their small town market. They were house rich and cash poor, like so many people their age who'd assumed their children would somehow bridge the gap between their resources and their needs. What about a reverse mortgage? I suggested. They could access their home equity to pay for care. Already looked into it. With Dad's medical expenses, they'd burn through the equity in 2 years, maybe 3. Then what? Then what? The question that had been lurking underneath every conversation, every demand, every guilt trip. They hadn't just failed to plan for aging, they'd actively planned on me. Sarah, I need to tell you something else. Jennifer and I have been talking with our financial advisor. With the new house and Emma starting private school, we can't actually commit to $2,500 a month long term. We could maybe do $1,500, and only for the first year. Of course they couldn't. David's generous offer had lasted exactly 18 hours before being revised downward by a third. What about Jessica's contribution? Silence. Then, she's reassessing. Turns out Tommy needs more intensive therapy than they thought, and their insurance doesn't cover it. She might be able to do $1,000 a month, but not until after the holidays. I sat down heavily on my couch. In less than 24 hours, their promised financial support had dropped from $5,000 a month to $2,500, and even that was temporary and uncertain. So you're telling me that your plan is for me to give up my 6-figure career to provide full-time care for $2,500 a month from parents who can't afford professional help, with financial support from siblings who are already backing out of their commitments? Sarah, when you put it like that. How else should I put it, David? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like the same dynamic we've had since we were kids. Everyone else's needs and limitations get accommodated, and I get asked to make it all work somehow. The drive to the hospital took 3 hours and 47 minutes, and I spent most of it on the phone with Dr. Martinez. I feel like I'm abandoning him, I told her as I passed the exit from my old high school. He's 71 years old, he's confused and scared, and he needs help. Sarah, needing help and being entitled to sacrifice your child's life for that help are two completely different things. Your father needing care doesn't automatically make you responsible for providing it personally. But when I walked into his hospital room and saw him looking small and fragile in the white bed, all my professional boundaries crumbled like tissue paper. Sarah, sweetheart, you came. Dad's voice was weaker than I'd ever heard it, and when he reached for my hand, his grip felt like paper. I was so scared you wouldn't. Linda said you were busy with work. The knife of guilt twisted deeper. Even drugged and disoriented, he was more considerate of my time than Mom had been in 3 days of phone calls. Of course I came, Dad. How are you feeling? Confused, he admitted, and for a moment his eyes cleared completely. The doctor says I need surgery. Hip replacement, maybe. I don't remember falling, Sarah. I don't remember a lot of things lately. This was the conversation we'd never had. In all the family phone calls and emergency planning, no one had actually acknowledged what we all knew, that Dad's mind was slipping away piece by piece, and the fall was just the latest symptom of something much bigger. The surgeon wants to operate tomorrow morning. Mom appeared in the doorway, looking haggard. Her usually perfect hair was flat on one side, and she was wearing yesterday's clothes. But they're saying his recovery will be complicated because of the dementia. It was the first time I'd heard anyone in my family say the word out loud. What's the timeline looking like? I asked the nurse who came in to check Dad's vitals. 6 to 8 weeks minimum before he's weight-bearing, she said. Then another month or 2 of intensive physical therapy. But honestly, at his age and with the cognitive issues, he'll probably need some level of assistance permanently. Permanently. Not the temporary crisis everyone had been pretending this was, but a complete restructuring of his remaining years. After the nurse left, Mom pulled me into the hallway. Sarah, I have to tell you something. The social worker wants to meet with us tomorrow about discharge planning. She's asking about home modifications, care schedules, medical equipment. I told her you were coming to help, but she's saying it's not that simple. She wants to know about your experience with dementia patients, your availability, whether you have medical training. Mom, I don't have medical training. I'm a therapist, not a nurse. But you understand people with mental health issues. Isn't this similar? The question was so fundamentally wrong it took my breath away. Dementia isn't a mental health issue, Mom. It's a neurological disease. He needs medical care, not therapy. Her face crumpled. Then what are we supposed to do? The social worker mentioned something called custodial care that insurance won't cover. She said it could cost $8,000 to $15,000 a month depending on his needs. $15,000 a month. Even if David and Jessica maintained their reduced contributions, we were talking about a $12,000 monthly shortfall. Every month. For years. There might be VA benefits, I said, grasping for solutions. Dad served 2 years before I was born. 2 years in peacetime. The social worker already checked. He doesn't qualify for care benefits. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. Sarah, I ran the numbers last night. Even if we sell the house, even if I go back to work full-time, we can't afford professional care for more than 18 months. And I can't. I can't lift him or help him to the bathroom or manage his medications. I'm 66 years old and I have arthritis in both hands. For the first time in this entire crisis, Mom was being completely honest about her limitations instead of just assuming mine didn't matter. What about Marcus? I asked. Has anyone even asked him? He's still in school, Sarah. He can't. He's 24, Mom. Jessica was married with a baby at 24. David was 2 years into his career. But somehow Marcus gets a pass because he's in law school. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. That night, I sat in my old bedroom, now Mom's craft room, surrounded by scrapbooking supplies and half-finished photo albums, making a list of everything I'd lose if I moved home. The list filled 3 pages of legal paper I'd found in Mom's desk drawer, and seeing it all written out was like staring at an inventory of my entire adult life. Clients, 47 active cases, with 8 in critical phases of treatment. Mrs. Chen's daughter was finally making progress with her eating disorder after 6 months of twice-weekly sessions. The Morrison family was scheduled to have their first supervised visit with their son next week, a milestone 18 months in the making. Sarah Valdez was supposed to start EMDR therapy for her childhood trauma on Thursday. Contracts: the Miller Corporation consultation worth $85,000 over 6 months. The hospital system training program I'd spent 8 months developing. 3 speaking engagements already booked through next spring, including the keynote at the Midwest Trauma Conference that I'd been working toward for 2 years. Personal: my lease on the Chicago apartment didn't expire until June, meaning I'd be paying rent on a place I couldn't live in. The house I'd been saving for, I'd finally found one in Lincoln Park with original hardwood floors and a sun-drenched office where I could see private clients. The seller was supposed to call tomorrow with their decision on my offer. Then there were the smaller losses that somehow hurt more: season tickets to the Chicago Symphony that I'd waited 3 years to get. The pottery class I'd just started, the first creative outlet I'd allowed myself since graduate school. Thursday night dinners with my friend Elena, the only person outside of therapy who knew the full truth about my family. At 2:17 a.m., I crept downstairs to call Elena from the kitchen, whispering so I wouldn't wake anyone. "Jesus, Sarah, are you okay? It's 2 in the morning. I'm at my parents' house," I said, and somehow that explained everything. Elena had been my study partner in graduate school, and she'd lived through enough late-night phone calls to know exactly what my family was capable of. "Please tell me you're not actually considering their insane plan." My dad looked so small, and confused. When he saw me today, he started crying and thanking me for coming, like he couldn't believe I'd actually show up for him. Of course he couldn't believe it. Based on his track record, showing up isn't exactly his strong suit. She was right, but it didn't make the guilt any easier. The social worker wants to meet tomorrow to discuss discharge planning. They're going to ask me directly if I can provide care. And what are you going to tell them? I stared out the kitchen window at the backyard where I'd spent countless hours as a teenager, reading on the porch swing while keeping one ear tuned for Marcus calling from inside. I don't know. Sarah Michelle Rodriguez Brennan, listen to me. Elena only used my full name when she was about to deliver hard truths. I watched you build your practice session by session. I held your hair back when you threw up from stress during your licensing exam. I was there when you finally saved enough money to move out of that horrible studio apartment. Are you really going to throw all of that away to live in your mother's basement? When she put it like that, it sounded insane. But at 2 a.m. in my childhood kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of every sacrifice I'd made for this family, insane was starting to feel like duty. What if he dies while I'm not here? I whispered. What if something happens and I'm in Chicago living my perfect little life while he's in some understaffed facility where nobody knows that he takes his coffee with exactly 2 sugars and gets agitated if the TV is too loud? Then that's sad, but it's not your fault. Sarah, you are not responsible for preventing every possible bad outcome for your parents. After we hung up, I found myself standing in the doorway of Marcus's old room, now converted into Dad's home office. His CPA certificate still hung on the wall, along with a photo from his retirement party 2 years ago. He looked proud and healthy, surrounded by colleagues and clients who genuinely seemed to care about him. It struck me that Dad had always been more present for other people's families than for his own. He'd spent 38 years helping his clients plan for their financial futures while apparently never considering his own. He'd been the trusted advisor who helped the Hendersons set up college funds for their twins, who'd guided the Pattersons through retirement planning after Mr. Patterson's heart attack. But when it came to his own family's future, he'd just assumed we'd figure it out. I was still standing there when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Mom appeared in her bathrobe, looking older than I'd ever seen her. I couldn't sleep either, she said quietly. I keep thinking about what the doctor said today. About Dad needing assistance with activities of daily living. When did he become someone who needed assistance? Last year he was still doing our taxes, still driving to the grocery store. For a moment, she sounded like a frightened old woman instead of my manipulative mother, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Mom, when was the last time you and Dad talked about what would happen when you got older? Really talked about it? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, we always said we'd never be a burden to our children. But I guess we thought there would be more time to figure it out. The meeting with the hospital social worker was scheduled for 10 a.m., which gave me exactly 3 hours to figure out how to explain that I was a licensed therapist who couldn't actually provide the medical care my father needed. I'd spent most of the night researching dementia care requirements, and the reality was more complex than any of us had understood. Mrs. Brennan, the social worker, Janet Reeves, addressed my mother while flipping through Dad's chart. Your husband will need assistance with medication management, mobility support, and cognitive redirection. The occupational therapist estimates he'll require a minimum of 8 hours of direct supervision daily, increasing to round-the-clock care as his condition progresses. 8 hours minimum. I watched Mom's face go pale as Janet continued. I understand your daughter Sarah has offered to provide care. She turned to me with a professional smile that didn't hide her skepticism. Can you tell me about your experience with dementia patients? I'm a licensed clinical therapist, I said carefully, but I don't have medical training or experience with dementia care specifically. Janet's pen stopped moving. I see. And you're planning to relocate from Chicago? The question hung in the air like a trap. Everyone was looking at me, Mom, David, even Jessica, who'd driven down from the airport that morning with her perfect hair and her sympathetic but distant expression. We're still discussing the logistics, I said finally. Janet set down her pen entirely. I need to be very direct with you all. Mr. Brennan's care needs are significant and will only increase. Without proper training, family caregivers often find themselves overwhelmed within weeks. I've seen too many situations where well-meaning children burn out completely, sometimes endangering both themselves and their parent. But surely with some training. Mom started. Mrs. Brennan, dementia care isn't just about willingness to help. Your husband will likely experience sundowning, aggressive episodes, and increasing confusion. He'll need specialized equipment, medication management, and potentially physical restraint during agitated periods. Are you prepared for that level of care? The silence stretched until Jessica cleared her throat. What about those memory care facilities you mentioned? The ones that specialize in this? Sunrise Manor has an excellent program, Janet said, pulling out a brochure. They have 24-hour nursing staff, specialized therapies, and secure units for patients who wander. The cost is $11,800 per month, plus additional fees for medication management and specialized services. David whistled low. So we're talking $14,000 a month, realistically. Conservatively, yes. I did the math automatically, $168,000 per year. Even if they sold the house and Mom went back to work full-time, they'd burn through their resources in 18 months, exactly as Mom had calculated. There might be other options, Janet continued. Adult day programs for the early stages, home health aides for specific hours, family respite services. But I have to tell you, most families in your situation end up needing to blend several approaches. She handed me a packet of information that felt heavy as a brick. Sarah, if you do decide to provide care, I strongly recommend you start with a caregiver training program. The Alzheimer's Association offers a 6-week course that covers safety, communication techniques, and crisis management. You'll also need to understand the legal implications, power of attorney, healthcare directives, potential guardianship proceedings. 6 weeks of training just to begin. I thought about Mrs. Chen's daughter, who was supposed to start her junior year of college next month. About the Morrison family's supervised visit that I've been planning for weeks. About the keynote speech that could establish my reputation nationally. After Janet left, we sat in the hospital cafeteria picking at terrible coffee and stale pastries, nobody willing to address the obvious. Finally, Jessica spoke. Maybe we're approaching this all wrong. What if we looked into splitting Dad's time? Like, he could stay with Sarah for a few months, then with David, then with me. Jess, people with dementia need consistency, I said. Moving him around would only make the confusion worse. Then what do you suggest? David's voice had an edge. Because Janet made it pretty clear that amateur caregiving isn't going to cut it. I stared at the packet of information, thinking about something Janet had said almost casually. I've seen too many situations where well-meaning children burn out completely. I want to ask you all something, I said slowly. If I do this, if I give up my practice and move home, what happens when I burn out? What happens when Dad's care needs exceed what one person can manage, or when I have my own health crisis, or when this arrangement stops working for any reason? The question clearly hadn't occurred to any of them. We'd figure something out, Mom said weakly. Like you figured out this situation. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. We sat there for another 10 minutes, the weight of reality settling over us like fog, before my phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen, calling about her daughter's appointment tomorrow. Dr. Brennan, I know you're dealing with a family emergency, but Emma had a really difficult night. She's asking if she can have an extra session this week. I looked around the table at my family, at Mom's desperate eyes, David's frustrated impatience, Jessica's carefully maintained composure, and felt something shift inside me. Mrs. Chen, I'll be back in Chicago tomorrow. We can schedule her for Thursday afternoon. The decision had made itself. The silence at the cafeteria table was deafening. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me like I just announced I was joining a cult. You'll be back tomorrow. Mom's voice cracked on the last word. Sarah, your father is having surgery in 6 hours. I know. And I'll stay until he's stable and out of recovery. But Mrs. Chen's daughter is 17 years old and hasn't eaten a full meal in 4 days. She needs me. David's laugh was bitter. She needs you. A teenager you've known for what, 6 months? She needs you more than your own father. David, that teenager pays me to help her recover from an eating disorder that nearly killed her last winter. Yes, she needs me. That's literally my job. Your job, Jessica repeated, like the words tasted wrong. Sarah, this is Dad we're talking about. Not some random client. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my calendar, turning the screen toward them. Tomorrow I have 7 appointments scheduled. Jennifer Wu at 9 a.m., she's processing childhood sexual abuse and we're at a critical breakthrough point. The Valdez family at 11 a.m. for their first session together after 18 months of individual work. At 2 p.m., I'm meeting with a 16-year-old boy whose parents found him writing a suicide note last week. My voice was steady, professional, but my hands were shaking. At 4 p.m., Dr. Patricia Holmes and I are consulting on a case involving 3 siblings who were removed from their home due to neglect. And at 6 p.m., I have my regular session with Michael Santos, who's finally ready to talk about why he hasn't spoken to his mother in 2 years. I put the phone away. So yes, David. They need me. All of them need me to show up and do my job. Mom was crying now, quiet tears that somehow felt more manipulative than her usual dramatics. I can't believe you're comparing strangers to your own family. They're not strangers, Mom. They're people who trust me to help them heal from the exact same kind of family dysfunction we're sitting in right now. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica shifted uncomfortably, David's jaw tightened, and Mom's tears stopped abruptly. What's that supposed to mean? Jessica asked. I thought about Sarah Valdez, 18 years old and afraid to leave for college because she'd been managing her siblings since age 12. About Michael Santos, who'd sacrificed his scholarship to care for his mother, only to be guilt-tripped when he finally set boundaries. About Jennifer Wu, whose parents had trained her to believe that saying no to family meant she was selfish and ungrateful. It means I spend 40 hours a week helping people recover from being their family's designated caretaker. And here I am, at 34 years old, still playing the same role I've played since I was 12. That's not fair, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked me what I wanted instead of just assuming I'd handle whatever crisis came up? The cafeteria was nearly empty now, just a few nurses grabbing coffee between shifts and a family huddled around a corner table, dealing with their own medical emergency. Normal people with normal problems, not sitting in a hospital cafeteria trying to figure out how to rearrange someone's entire life. Sarah. Mom's voice was different now, smaller. What if we hired someone to help? Like a part-time aide, so you wouldn't be doing everything alone. I almost laughed. With what money, Mom? Janet just told us professional care costs $14,000 a month. How exactly are you planning to pay for part-time help? We could take out a loan against the house. To pay for care you can't afford, so I can give up my career to provide care I'm not trained for. I shook my head. That's not a solution. That's just a more expensive way to make this my problem. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, * how's dad? Saw your location at the hospital. Sending thoughts and prayers, but please remember what we talked about. You can't save people who won't save themselves, *. Smart kid. Still smarter than me. Jessica leaned forward across the cafeteria table, her voice dropping to that tone she perfected as the family peacemaker. Sarah, what if we approached this completely differently? What if you stayed in Chicago and we hired a geriatric care manager to coordinate everything from there? You could oversee Dad's care professionally without having to physically be here. It was the first reasonable suggestion anyone had made in 3 days, and the fact that it came from Jessica, who usually solved problems by pretending they didn't exist, caught me off guard. That could actually work, I said slowly. A care manager could handle the day-to-day coordination, medical appointments, medication management. I could review reports, make decisions about care plans, handle the complex stuff remotely. David's expression brightened for the first time since I'd arrived. How much would something like that cost? I pulled up my phone and searched for geriatric care managers in their area. Looks like $120 to $180 an hour, depending on the level of service. If we're talking about 20 hours a week for comprehensive management, that's maybe $4,000 a month. $4,000 is a lot less than $14,000, Mom said quietly. But it still doesn't solve the fundamental problem. I set my phone down and looked at each of them. Dad needs round-the-clock supervision as his condition progresses. Even with a care manager coordinating services, you're still looking at home health aides, medical equipment, facility placement eventually. The money has to come from somewhere. The silence stretched until Jessica spoke again, and this time her voice was different, more honest than I'd heard from her in years. Sarah, I need to tell you something. When Mom called me crying yesterday, my first thought wasn't about Dad. It was relief that this wasn't my problem to solve. She stared at her untouched coffee. I've been letting you handle family crises my entire adult life because it was easier than dealing with them myself. David shifted uncomfortably. Jess, that's not. No, it is. When Dad had his mini-stroke 3 years ago, I sent flowers and waited for Sarah to call with updates. When Mom was having that meltdown about their finances last Christmas, I listened for 10 minutes and then said I had to go help with the kids' bath time. Jessica looked directly at me. I turned you into the family's unpaid therapist because it meant I didn't have to be emotionally available. The admission hit me like a physical blow, partly because of its honesty and partly because she was right. I had become the family's emotional clearinghouse, processing everyone's crises so they didn't have to. The thing is, Jessica continued, I've been in therapy too. Since Tommy was diagnosed with ADHD and I realized I had no idea how to help my own kid because I'd never learned to help myself. She laughed bitterly. My therapist asked me last week who I call when I'm overwhelmed, and I realized the answer was always you. Never David, never Mom or Dad. Just you. That's what family does, Mom protested weakly. No, Mom. That's what Sarah does. There's a difference. David was staring at the table, his jaw working like he was chewing words he didn't want to swallow. Finally, my partner at the firm has been seeing a family therapist since his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 2 years ago. Not to provide care, to deal with the guilt of not providing care. This was new territory for us, actual honesty about our family dynamics instead of the usual performance of obligation and resentment. What did his therapist tell him? I asked. That he could be a good son without destroying his own life. That his mother needed professional medical care, not a guilty child pretending to be qualified. David met my eyes for the first time in 2 days. He said the best thing he ever did for his family was stay in his lane and let the professionals handle what they were trained for. My phone rang again, Dr. Martinez, returning my call from earlier. I'd left her a voicemail at 6 a.m. asking for an emergency consultation. Excuse me, I said, stepping away from the table. Rachel, thank you for calling back. Sarah, I got your message. How are you holding up? I'm sitting in a hospital cafeteria having the most honest conversation my family has had in 20 years, and I still feel guilty for not sacrificing my entire life to fix their crisis. That guilt is 34 years of conditioning. It doesn't mean you're making the wrong choice. When I returned to the table, something had shifted in the dynamic. Mom was holding Dad's insurance paperwork, actually reading through the coverage details instead of just panicking about them. I found something, she said, looking up with the first spark of hope I'd seen from her. There's a benefit called transitional care management that covers up to 90 days of coordinated care after hospital discharge. It includes care planning, medication management, and family education. 90 days. Not a permanent solution, but enough time to develop a real plan instead of just expecting me to become their full-time crisis manager. Mom, I said carefully, what if we use those 90 days to set up a sustainable long-term care plan? Professional services, financial planning, maybe even exploring whether you and Dad should consider moving to a senior community. For the first time since this started, nobody immediately dismissed the suggestion as impossible or cruel. The conversation was interrupted by Dad's surgeon, Dr. Patel, appearing at our table still in his scrubs. The Brennan family. I have good news about Richard's surgery. We all stood at once, that automatic family crisis response I knew so well from years of emergency room visits and school principal calls. The hip replacement went perfectly, Dr. Patel said, his tired smile genuine. But I need to discuss his cognitive status with you. During pre-op, we did some additional assessments, and I'm recommending a full neurological workup once he's stable. Mom gripped the back of her chair. What kind of workup? Memory testing, brain imaging, medication review. What you're seeing at home, the confusion, the falls, the personality changes, these aren't normal aging. I suspect we're looking at moderate-stage Alzheimer's, possibly accelerated by small strokes we haven't caught yet. The words hit like a diagnosis we'd all been avoiding. Moderate stage meant we were past the point of simple forgetfulness and into the realm of genuine incapacity. How long do we have before? Jessica's voice trailed off. Every case is different, but typically we see significant decline within 18 to 24 months. Mr. Brennan will need increasing levels of supervision and eventually, specialized memory care. After Dr. Patel left, we sat in stunned silence until David's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and winced. It's Jennifer. She's been calling all morning about the closing on our new house. He answered with false cheerfulness. Hey babe, yeah, we're still at the hospital. What do you mean the closing might be delayed? His face went pale. Jennifer, I can't deal with real estate issues right now. No, I can't just leave. This is my father we're talking about. I watched him pace away from the table, his voice rising as the conversation continued, and felt a familiar stab of recognition. The same tone Dad had used when Mom called him at work during Marcus's parent-teacher conferences. The same frustrated impatience I'd heard in my own voice when clients called during family emergencies. David's about to learn something I figured out years ago, I said quietly to Jessica. You can't be fully present for everyone all the time. Is that why you're so good at boundaries? Because you learned they were survival? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an email marked urgent. The subject line made my stomach drop. Miller Corporation contract, immediate response required. I opened it with shaking hands. The email was from Janet Miller herself, not her assistant. Asterisk Sarah, I hope everything is okay with your family emergency. However, I need to know by 5 p.m. today whether you'll be available for our scheduled kickoff meeting Monday morning. The board is getting nervous about delays, and if you can't commit to the timeline we discussed, we'll need to explore other options. I understand family comes first, but this represents a significant investment for us, asterisk. The Miller contract. 6 months of work worth $85,000, the kind of corporate client that would establish my reputation in organizational psychology. Janet Miller was notoriously decisive. If I backed out now, there wouldn't be a second chance. I checked the time, 2:47 p.m. 2 hours and 13 minutes to decide between my father's crisis and my professional future. Sarah. Mom was watching my face. What's wrong now? I showed her the email, watching her expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that might have been guilt. I don't understand, she said finally. Can't you just reschedule? Mom, this isn't a dentist appointment. This is a Fortune 500 company that's been planning this project for 8 months. If I cancel now, they'll hire someone else permanently. David returned to the table, his own phone call apparently not going well. Jennifer says if I miss the closing tomorrow, we lose the house. Apparently the sellers have another backup offer. We sat there, 3 middle-aged children discovering that the world didn't stop for our family emergency. That our parents' crisis, however genuine, couldn't automatically take precedence over the lives we built. Maybe, Jessica said slowly, this is what normal families deal with. Having to balance competing responsibilities instead of just assuming one person will drop everything. The observation hung in the air like a revelation. For the first time in 34 years, we were all being forced to acknowledge that our individual lives had value too. My phone rang again. This time it was Marcus, calling from law school. Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I want to contribute something too, but not the way they're expecting. His voice was steady, more adult than I'd ever heard it. I can't move home or provide care, but I can research legal options. Dad's going to need guardianship proceedings eventually, power of attorney transfers, maybe Medicaid planning. Let me handle the legal side while you figure out the care management piece. Smart kid. Getting smarter every day. After Marcus's call, I found myself staring at my laptop screen in the hospital family lounge, cursor blinking in the reply field to Janet Miller's email. Around me, other families dealt with their own crises, a woman arguing with insurance companies, teenagers doing homework while their grandfather recovered from surgery, the quiet desperation of people whose lives had been temporarily derailed. At 4:23 p.m., I started typing. Asterisk Janet, I understand the board's concerns about timeline. I can absolutely commit to Monday's kickoff meeting and the full project schedule. My family situation is being handled through professional care coordination, which will allow me to maintain my Chicago-based commitments without interruption, asterisk. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately called the geriatric care manager I'd researched earlier. Compassionate Care Solutions, this is Margaret. Hi, my name is Sarah Brennan. My father just had hip surgery and we need immediate care coordination for post-discharge planning. He has moderate-stage Alzheimer's. I see. Are you local to the patient? I'm in Chicago, he's in Millfield. I'm a licensed therapist and I understand the complexities involved, but I need someone on site who can handle day-to-day management while I oversee the broader care plan. Margaret's voice warmed slightly. That's actually an ideal arrangement. Many families try to micromanage from a distance, but having a clinical professional who understands boundaries makes my job much easier. When would you like to schedule an assessment? Tomorrow morning, if possible. My father will likely be discharged within 48 hours. When I returned to Dad's room, I found Mom sitting beside his bed, holding his hand while he dozed. For a moment, she looked like the mother I'd wanted her to be when I was 12, present, caring, focused on someone other than herself. The care manager will be here tomorrow at 10 a.m., I told her quietly. Her name is Margaret Santos, she's been doing this for 15 years, and she specializes in Alzheimer's cases. Mom's relief was visible. How much will it cost? $150 an hour for assessment and care planning, then $4,200 a month for comprehensive management. That includes coordinating medical appointments, managing home health services, handling insurance authorizations, and providing weekly reports to family. $4,000 a month is still a lot of money, Sarah. It's less than you'd pay me if I moved home and gave up my practice. And Margaret actually knows what she's doing. I pulled up my phone calculator. David's contributing $1,500, Jessica's contributing $1,000, I'll cover $1,200, and you and Dad will need to cover $500. That's manageable if we're realistic about what Dad needs. For the first time in 3 days, the math actually worked. Dad stirred, his eyes opening slowly. Sarah. You're still here. I'm flying back to Chicago tomorrow afternoon, Dad. But I've arranged for someone very qualified to help coordinate your care. Her name is Margaret, and she's going to make sure you get everything you need. He nodded, seeming to understand. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your practice, your life in Chicago. I know I wasn't. I wasn't always there when you were growing up, but I'm proud of who you became. The apology I'd been waiting 34 years to hear, delivered in a hospital room while he was recovering from surgery and his mind was half lost to dementia. I love you too, Dad. At 6:47 p.m., I called Dr. Martinez one final time. I think I just figured out how to be a good daughter without setting myself on fire, I told her. Tell me more. I'm going to love my parents enough to get them professional help instead of pretending I can save them myself. The revelation felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 3 decades. 6 months later, I stood in my new Lincoln Park house, looking out at the garden I'd finally had time to plant, when Mom called with an update I'd been expecting. Margaret says Dad needs to move to memory care next month, she said, and for the first time in our relationship, her voice held acceptance instead of panic. Sunrise Manor has an opening in their secured unit. How are you feeling about that? I asked, genuinely curious rather than bracing for crisis. Sad. Relieved. Guilty about feeling relieved. She paused. But Margaret walked me through their program yesterday, and Sarah, they have music therapy and art classes designed specifically for Alzheimer's patients. Dad actually smiled when the activities director played Glenn Miller records. Through my kitchen window, I could see my neighbors' kids playing in their yard, their laughter mixing with the sounds of a normal Tuesday evening. 6 months ago, I would have been living in my parents' basement, microwaving frozen dinners between medication schedules and bathroom assistants. The financial piece is working out too, Mom continued. The house sold for $195,000, and with Dad's pension and the care coordination we have now, we can afford Sunrise Manor for at least 3 years. 3 years. Not forever, but not the 18-month financial cliff we've been staring at in that hospital cafeteria. Mom, I'm proud of you, I said, meaning it. 6 months ago, you were convinced the only solution was for me to sacrifice my life. Now you're managing a complex care situation like a competent adult. She laughed, actually laughed. Margaret says I've become one of her most organized clients. Turns out I'm quite good at advocating for your father when I'm not panicking about doing everything myself. After we hung up, I pulled up my calendar for tomorrow, Mrs. Chen at 9 a.m., whose daughter was now maintaining her weight and planning for college. The Morrison family at noon, who just celebrated 6 months of their son living at home successfully. My corporate consultation at 3 p.m., the follow-up project that came from the Miller contract I'd almost sacrificed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, * bar exam results come out tomorrow. Whatever happens, thanks for showing me that family obligation doesn't mean family martyrdom, *. Then Jessica, * Tommy's therapist says our family dynamic has improved dramatically since we stopped making you responsible for everyone's problems. Who knew, *. And David, * Dad asked about you yesterday. Told him you were busy saving other families. He said that sounded about right, *. At 7 p.m., Elena arrived for our weekly dinner, carrying wine and the latest gossip from our graduate school cohort. So, she said, settling into my kitchen with the familiarity of someone who'd watched me nearly throw this all away, any regrets about not becoming a full-time caregiver? I thought about Dad and his memory care facility, participating in programs designed by professionals who understood his condition. About Mom, who discovered she was actually quite capable when she stopped assuming someone else would handle everything. About my siblings, who were learning to contribute money and emotional support without expecting me to coordinate their efforts. I realized something, I told Elena, pouring wine into glasses I'd bought to celebrate my new house. The title asks when I realized my parents shouldn't have had kids. But the real question was when I realized I didn't have to keep parenting them. She raised her glass. And when was that? When I finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable their helplessness. We clinked glasses in my sun-filled kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd almost sacrificed to fix people who were perfectly capable of learning to fix themselves. The best revenge wasn't cruelty or abandonment. It was boundaries, professional help, and the radical act of building a life they couldn't guilt me into destroying.